And so we have to be willing to make that next step and say, somebody has to, and therefore it might as well be me.
Welcome to the Juggling the Chaos of Recovery podcast, where we focus on health and wellness and overcoming all types of addictions. You're in the right place if you're a mom, dad, sibling, or caregiver who has a loved one who is or was struggling with an eating disorder or any other kind of addiction. In a time where everything seems heavy, I'm here to bring you a very real, yet lighthearted take on what the heck we're all supposed to do with our lives while we care for our loved ones who are struggling. One thing holds true throughout it all. You can't juggle the chaos without smiling. At least a little bit. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Moira Gorski here, and so glad that you have come back. And coming up on even by the time this episode airs, it probably will be past the 2-year mark that I've been podcasting. So I'm proud of myself for that, but really grateful for those that come back and listen and have supported this podcast. And I love the fact that I have been on a few podcasts and I've been invited to be a returning guest. And so I thought I would ask Lucy Forsting to come back to be a returning guest of mine. We always have great conversations about all kinds of things. And so, Lucy, I'm glad you came back, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I will, in the show notes, I'll put our other episode in there. But she is, again, a wonderful gal that's been helping people. I'll have you give your a couple of minutes bio there, but I found you with Synergy Connection Radio, your podcast, your services, again, of helping people, not just always in the traditional way, but in looking at things a little bit differently. And so we thought today we would talk about beliefs and changing our belief systems, changing our belief patterns, changing some things with beliefs, because again, we develop these beliefs over time, and sometimes they can be really good, and sometimes they can also be detrimental, especially if they're a false belief and things like that. So before we get into that, Lucy, thank you for coming back today to have another discussion.
Oh, you're very welcome. I enjoyed the last show we did together, and I love having you on my show as well. So
yeah.
Fun to be here.
Yeah. Yep. And we were going to talk about beliefs. And again, I found it interesting that we were going to have this conversation today, as I accompanied my daughter to a therapy session of hers today. And we were talking about beliefs. We were talking about, again, those false beliefs, or those beliefs that like happen a long time ago. Like our mother said something to us, or we spilled the milk on the table and our dad yelled at us and said, "You're always a slob. You're always a slob." And then we take that into our mind that's what we believe, that we're always a slob and we're always a slob. And then if it happens again, we make a mess. We say in our head, well, my dad says I'm always a slob. And not that it's true, right? You happen to maybe your hands, like maybe the glass was big and maybe your hands were small and maybe it was slippery. Like maybe something else happened that caused that milk to spill. It has nothing to do with the fact that belief or that statement that your father made, right, that you're a slob. And so, but we take those, right? I mean, a lot of times that's what happens. It's like I'm almost 60 years old. But there are things that I heard as a child that sometimes I chose to believe, but they really weren't true.
Mm-hmm. No, that's very, very true. So my background is as a marriage and family therapist.
Yeah.
So that you have that. And so that was, like I said, 40 years ago. So what I did with individuals and families then is nothing like what I do today. And so you kind of learn by experience as you come out of graduate school and you're following a predictable, let's say, and maybe a particular style of therapy. And then as you do more and more work with your clients, you realize what works and what doesn't work so well. Mm-hmm. And so you begin to fine tune things. But belief systems are rooted, at a very, very early age. So the way I handle the situation when I'm working with somebody is I have them work in increments of 10 years. And so if you're 60 years old, you're going to have 6 blocks of 10. If you're 70, you're going to have 7. If you're only 14, I've got somebody right now that's very young. So she couldn't go very far, but she began to recognize very quickly that she did have some strong beliefs and that she was terrified of failing. And so her beliefs forced her to do certain things that she regretted doing out of a fear of failing. So let's just say with somebody who's 50, they might work from, birth to 10. And I would ask them to, these are assignments, it's not impromptu thinking necessarily, but I would ask them to think about those first 10 years and what were their strong beliefs about who their family was, who they were, what school was all about, what friendship was about. Mistakes, how do you feel about mistakes? How do you feel about success? And so they would look at each little category and write, down their feelings about that or their memories. And then they would go from 11 to 20. And how many of the beliefs from 0 to 10 were they pulling through into that next decade? Because we don't leave anything behind unless it's something that we're taught to let go of. So they would be bringing along maybe some similar beliefs about, well, my friends were like this, so therefore they're going to be like this in this age group. And that's not necessarily true, especially if you're relocating or going away to college or your family has moved from where you were when you were 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And now you're in a different location. Certainly schools and teachers are different. You might have experienced an illness or an accident, something of trauma. So again, you have to decide what things have I brought with me from my first 10 years into my second 10 years, and are they serving me? Is this something that is beneficial, or are some of them creating conflicts now? And as you get maybe ready to get married or be in serious relationships, a lot of those memories of mom and dad or other people that you saw that were in relationships, are those the memories that are beneficial because it was a great relationship? Or maybe you were in a home where there was alcoholism or drug addiction or a lot of stress and there was a lot of yelling and screaming. Even though you say, I don't want to be like that, the reality is that we are like that because that's the learned behavior. And so you have to kind of figure out, whoops, I don't want to do that. How do I keep myself from doing that particular behavior?
Yeah, I think it's, we've talked a few times I've talked a few times with other guests on this podcast about how those patterns, there's generational patterns and they tend to repeat themselves. And it's very eye-opening when you can do that type of work, that you can look at, like you said, this is how it was growing up in my house. And like, how is it today? Even though, like you said, yelling's not good. I don't want to yell. It's not a good thing, but we become comfortable with that, or it feels okay, even though to someone else, it might not feel okay, because again, that's not what their environment was about. Right. I mean, I remember some of the first marital counseling that my husband and I did. That was, she did, I don't know if it was called a genogram, or you would probably know. Yeah, genogram. So we laid out like the family tree, right, on both sides of, my husband's side and my side. And that's what we talked about, was like the relationships and how was it with, the grandmother and the grandfather, the mother, the father, the cousins or sisters or whatever. And it's very revealing to see how there's some good things that followed, right? And there's also some patterns that I saw in my family that really stuck out to me. And I didn't really realize it at that point. And what I found fascinating, now I married somebody that was different than the pattern of the men that, like my mom, the Evans women were marrying, and even my sisters. It was a very specific dynamic. And, but the guys that I dated, fit right into that.
Mhm.
And I remember when I met my husband, I was like, wow, this is different than my other relationships. And he was different than those men, the way that they showed up in the lives of, my sisters and my mother and my grandmother and, all of that. It was very, very, very interesting. And again, I think knowledge is power. So when we have that, when we can see that,
Mhm.
we can learn that, have that knowledge, then we do have, as I spoke with someone yesterday, even though there's these generational patterns and traumas, and we wish they didn't happen, like we have the power to sit here today and learn from that and also break those patterns. I think that's what's fascinating and what's very promising and hopeful is that we can learn from that, realize that, and say, guess what? It's going to stop here.
Mhm.
I'm going to work on continuing to move forward, but not continuing on with that pattern, that belief system about the way that men and women are, or whatever, whatever it is.
Right, right. I can think of a couple of situations with people I know where, in this particular case, it was a male whose father was absent, both emotionally and physically, much of the time. And so as he was growing up, I don't think he had much of a relationship until he was way into his adult years with his dad. And he remembers never having a relationship with his grandfather. His grandfather would come sit and not do anything, with the grandchildren, but just sit and kind of talk to the adults and not even acknowledge that they were there. So in this particular case, he has made sure that he has a great relationship with his grandchildren, that they know who he is, and they do things together, and he has an amazing relationship with his two children. So in his case, he said, no, I am not going to be like my grandfather was or my father was. I'm going to be involved. And, he's done that.
Yeah.
So I think you either repeat the pattern because it's what you're comfortable with, and you just keep doing the same thing over and over again, or you acknowledge that that's a pattern I don't want, and you stop it early on and you look for another way to interact.
Right. And sometimes, again, you can learn that on your own. And sometimes it's good to, hook up with, again, a therapist, a counselor, maybe a group of people that you gather together with and take a look at these things. Sometimes it's good to get some other people's perspectives. I mean, I know we're both we both support wellness and we take good care of ourselves, and we also promote that to other people. But I was also having this conversation with somebody that's on my team, because I lead a big wellness team, and she's a newer distributor, if you will, and newer, trying to just help other people. And she was really frustrated in that she's like, I don't know, they share this with me, and they're frustrated. They want to lose some weight, or they're not sleeping, and so they share their frustrations, but then they don't make the change. And we were talking about how is it that perhaps it's a belief system that they don't believe that they can feel better, or that they can, lose weight. And I don't like to talk a lot about, losing weight, but like feel better, or like change the way that they feel and look in life. Do they have this belief that it's just not going to happen? And so they have a hard time making that decision to move forward and to make a change and, do something different.
Sometimes it has to do with the fear of failure as much as anything. So we're used to complaining. I mean, everybody that I know at least complains about something. I wish that the government would take action and do such and such, or I wish people would pick up their trash, or so they're always looking to make some changes. But you have to be the one that does it. You can't just wish, right?
Right.
So I think that in many cases, they've grown up around people, male or female, that didn't take action. They just complained, but didn't, go and try and seek a remedy or add to a solution. And so we have to be willing to make that next step and say, somebody has to, and therefore it might as well be me. One of my favorite books that I used in family therapy, and I still recommend it, actually to all ages, but it's a great children's book and it's quite old, is The Little Engine That Could.
Mm.
And so, it's a Christmas story, and it's about an engine that needed to take the toys, for Santa into the village, but it required going over a very large hill. And all of the other engines basically were like, no, they didn't want to be bothered. And, they were tired or this, that, or the other thing. And so the little female engine, said, well, I think I can. And so it's that attitude, is that you have to have the attitude that you believe you can contribute at least to the solution.
Mm-hmm.
And so in her case, she hooked herself up to all of the little train box cars, loaded with toys. And she started up the mountain saying to herself, I think I can, I think I can. And of course, when she gets to the peak and goes down the other side, it was, I knew I could, I knew I could.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that we have to have that as our posture, is that if we want to lose weight, if we want to get healthy, if we want a better relationship or a better job or something, we have to start with the positive attitude of, I think I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
And then figure out how do I do it? And how do I not listen to that negative voice saying, no, you're not going to succeed? Because when they're looking at losing weight or getting healthy, it requires effort. There's no magic pill.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be willing to exercise and sleep better and, eat better and do a few things that maybe they're not used to doing.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're willing to make that commitment, then they can move to the position of, I think I can. And then finally, I knew I could.
Right.
But they have to be willing to do something. They can't just talk about it.
Yeah. And I like that. It's that visualization, or that just the thought of like that, I think I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember that book. Doesn't the little engine, doesn't she see all of the trains going, and she knows that they're going over the mountain and that's where she wants to go, right? No,
this story doesn't do that.
Okay.
This one is strictly a matter of Santa saying, I have to get these toys to the children in the valley.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, all of the other engines are in the engine yard,
mm-hmm.
and they're not being used at the moment. And so he's asked each one, the powerful one, the big one, the streamlined one, everything. And he finally comes to her. And of course, she's petite. Mm-hmm. She's not a very big engine, but she has the belief that she's strong enough.
Yeah, that's good. It's been a long time since I've read that. And I was saying that because I thought it was that visualization of like where she wants to be at, because a lot of times we'll talk with clients about that. Like, okay, so this is where you're at. If you could change one thing, like what would it look like, or where would you like to get to? And if we can have that visualization, or like how does it feel when you are sleeping better during the day? How do you feel during the day? Like having those type of talk about that experience of what it's going to be like when they get there, when they get over the mountain, or when they, feel better, they lose those 10 pounds, or how their knees are going to feel, or those kind of things. If we can help to visualize, then sometimes that helps them not only get started, but keeping them along that path.
Well, there's another very old expression about how do you eat an elephant? Mm-hmm. And it's one bite at a time. And I think the other factor with success for most people is breaking it into manageable pieces. Mm-hmm. So if they have an objective and they know that it's going to take them, say, a year to get there, then let's break it back to, what do you need to do this week? And what do you want to reach as your goal this month? And, help them move down that path, which is one of the reasons that I give homework when I do therapy, is because otherwise you plug in to your therapist once a week, once every other week. And then if you're living that life that has got you to where you currently are, that you don't want to be, homework helps you stay focused. It gives you that manageable piece that says, okay, I listened to this video, or I read this book, or I practiced my meditation, and I can see these little pieces of progress.
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually I know that I will get there. But if they're only checking in with you, once in a while, then they're real good for that hour or 45 minutes. And then they go right back out to their life.
Right.
So you have to give them a roadmap.
Right.
In my mind, at least.
Yeah. No, I believe that. It's good. You learn something, say, from your therapist, your counselor, and then you can practice it between, that week and the next time you see them.
Right.
And then, again, practice what you're learning to solidify that in your mind.
I have a family that I've worked with not too long ago, and her husband had died a few years ago, but the kids could see the difference in their mom. And they kept saying, Mom, we're so proud of you. You're doing this and this. So she then was getting that positive reinforcement. And then I had her doing homework, and then we would talk, once a week. But her children were wonderful, wonderful supporters because they could see the difference.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes people can see the changes before you can see them.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I have a client of mine, and she is on her, get healthy journey and lose some weight. She had been in a couple of accidents and, had put on some excess weight. And so she's making some changes and getting healthier. And her friend just noticed that, like, usually when she came home with the groceries, she would ask him for help. Can you come? I'm here, but bring one bag in. And then he would go and help her with the rest. Well, all of a sudden she was bringing the bags in all by herself, and, and then going for longer walks. And he brought it up to her. He said, what's going on with you? Like, you seem to have more energy. You seem to be, something's different. And he was noticing it. And she said, I guess it's true. I do. But sometimes those subtle things, even just, again, I carry all the bags in instead of having somebody help me. Those are little subtle changes, but they can lead. Those are the little things that, continue to happen and over time. They lead to change that is sustainable and, lead to larger things. But like you said, just one thing at a time, at a time. Yeah.
Right.
And so you talk about homework, and we talked a little bit about some ways to, change our beliefs. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like, what is some of the homework that you give people, and we can just talk about some of those modalities that have been shown to really help people. What do you give them, and why do you give that to them? How is it helping them?
Well, each case is going to be, different, but I do believe that if we have an attitude of gratitude, it makes a big difference in our lives. And so as long as I know that the individual is willing to think along those lines, I have a 21-day YouTube video, basically. And you can have it in your phone, which is what a lot of people do because they use their phones for their alarms in the morning. I have them do, that 21 days. And I would say the majority of the individuals I know have set their alarm 15 minutes early, because the 21-day, it's kind of a combination of meditation and mindfulness. And at the end of 21 days, they notice a serious difference in the way they're looking at life and the way they're feeling. So they're doing it for those first 15 minutes before they get up, and just laying in bed and listening, and then starting their day, as opposed to trying to fit it in to a busy day. Or you could do it at the end of the day, I think, too. So I would say those two options, beginning or end. But I start them on something like that, usually by the second week. I can send it to them as a link, and then they can put it on their phone or however they want to do it. I would think that meditation, taking moments to breathe, most of us don't even realize that we're doing what's called thoracic breathing pretty much throughout the day, rather than belly breathing. And it isn't until you move your breath into your belly and like a baby, where
Mhm.
I had children that I would lay on the floor because they didn't know how to do it. They would raise their shoulders like, is this the right way? And I would be like,
Mhm.
I don't think so. So I would have them lay down on the floor and I would put a heavy book on their stomach. And I would say, now, when you breathe, you have to move the book.
Mhm.
And that way they would know how it felt, because you can't really describe something and have them learn it. But if they can feel it physically, then they would know.
Mhm.
For an adult, maybe if they can't figure it out, that would be a good way to do it.
Mhm.
But otherwise, just resting their hands on their stomach
Mhm.
and practicing the deep breathing, so that it does move the belly out and then in. But certainly breath work is important for relaxation,
Mhm.
and meditation does calm us down. I often talk about journaling
Mhm.
because it's you writing to yourself.
Right.
So, what are you feeling on any given day? And if you date them, like if somebody has had a spouse die, a child die, journaling is wonderful to really see that you are progressing. So, if you date them and then you talk about, today my feelings were, this is what I'm thinking, this is how, life is at the moment, then a couple of months later they can go back and read those entries and realize, oh my goodness, I really have come a long ways, because then I was thinking this way, now I'm looking at this. I do resiliency training, because learning to be resilient is something that nobody teaches us. It's a school of hard knocks, so to speak.
Mhm.
And we may or may not come out of it resilient. It just depends upon whether you're learning confidence and competencies along the way. So a lot of those kind of homework assignments go into my working with somebody.
Mhm. Yeah, those are good. And as you know, I love journaling too. That's why I developed a journal, and because I've
Mhm.
done that so much myself in the last couple of years. And I love that, you're writing to yourself. You can do all kinds of things, with that. But just, I say that it's kind of like free therapy for
Yeah.
yourself, because you're writing things down, and it can be so revealing. And I love that if you just follow a prompt, like, today I'm feeling this,
Mhm.
today I wish for this,
Right.
even if it's just choosing, if you're not sure what to write, I always tell the listeners and my friends, like, if you're not sure what to write, then start with something like that.
Right.
Today I'm grateful for, and list 5 or 10 things. Today I'm feeling this way. Just starting with some type of prompt. I did some, what is it called? Automatic writing technique.
Yes, that works quite well, because I remember taking actually, it was a seminar, it was an all-day seminar with a gal who does, I would say it was close to automatic writing, and she called it writing down your soul.
Hmm.
And so it's your soul talking to you. And I would tell people, it's easy to do. However, you have to make sure your water, your pencils or pens, your paper, everything is there as you start, because otherwise you'll find a reason to get up.
Mhm.
And you set a timer for like 15 minutes.
Mhm.
And even if there's not one word on the paper at the end of 15 minutes, that's fine.
Mhm.
But if you are looking for your soul to talk to you, we don't normally do that. So
Mhm.
what happens is we're sitting there and we're thinking, okay, I need to write something. Okay, soul, talk to me. And it's kind of going, yeah, right. Okay, I don't think so. And after maybe 2 or 3 days of doing that, then your subconscious goes, oh my goodness, she really does want to know what I'm thinking.
Mhm.
And then it starts. And then you can't usually shut it off because it is there. But prior to that, we spend, and you and I've talked about this, we spend 95% of our waking moments intellectualizing, trying to figure out who said it, where did we hear it, what does it mean, Googling, looking up
Mhm.
all this stuff, instead of going into our heart center. And our heart is where our intuition is. And we do have 50 million brain cells that are there that help us kind of understand life, but we so seldom go there.
Mhm.
So, that's another thing that I try to help people understand is, let's check out your intuition. What does your intuition tell you about this? And if they say, I don't have a clue, well, then let's, begin to give it a voice.
Brought to you by Gorski Wellness and the possibility of a better you. Are you feeling sluggish? Ready for a change? Need more energy? Up for a bigger challenge? I'm Moira Gorski, retired nurse and wellness advocate. For over 22 years, I've been helping people live healthier lives while making small changes each and every day. Those small changes lead my clients to living a healthier lifestyle with markedly better health. As a brand ambassador for the Shaklee Corporation, the most clinically proven wellness company in the world, I guide my clients to make healthier choices each day with their food, supplements, skincare, workouts, and mindset. They say getting started is half the battle. Let's make healthy happen together. If you're ready for simple, natural, sustainable solutions to feeling and looking your best, let's connect. You'll find a link in the show notes or reach out to me at moiragorski.com. Here's to a better you. I'm a big Audible fan. So, I love to read books, but sometimes I don't find the time or I'm falling asleep while I'm reading. And I like to go for walks and I'm in the car. So I tend to pull my books up on Audible. And so I recently listened through Marie Forleo's Everything is Figure Outable.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah, it's a book. It's a fascinating book. It's been around for quite some time. And again, I think I'd heard about it and I was like, oh no, I'm not gonna. And she has Marie TV. And I was like, it just didn't, I wasn't drawn to it. And all of a sudden, one of my colleagues and friends suggested it. And I started to listen to it and I finished it within the week. But what she does is at the end of every chapter, she has, now what does she call them? Because I finished it but it's something about intention exercises or something like that. So she has journaling prompts at the end of every chapter. And so she gives you those questions to think about if it's about your goals or your wants or your intentions and things like that. And that was at the end, her last chapter was this automatic writing technique. And it was your future self writing to yourself, today. And, and I wish to tell you, or I wish that you would have known, or things like that. That's what it started with. And it was very profound. Same thing, 15 minutes, set the timer, don't look at the timer and just write until you hear the
little ding.
Yeah. And I really encourage people to do that. It does take, like you said, sometimes it's what are we supposed to write about? Right. I don't understand, but I think that's when we are so much trying to figure it out, right? Trying to write the right thing.
Exactly.
But this encourages you to write what comes to your mind. And if you need to do some of that meditation beforehand to just slow your mind down, kind of open it up, because then I think you're more in tune to listening, if you will, after some, meditation like that. Yeah.
The other aspect of that type of writing is not to be concerned if it's really a sentence with dangling participles or punctuation or spelling. It's not like it's going to be graded. It's just write and just keep writing until the dinger goes off. And then maybe go back and read what you wrote, because sometimes you will be writing so fast, the words are coming through and you're not even thinking about what does that mean. So then go back and read it afterwards.
Yeah. It's a really great exercise.
Another thing that you and I talked about before we started recording was a method that is referred to as emotional freedom technique. Most people know it as tapping. And you have meridians in your body, on your face, your forehead, beside, under your nose, your chin, the collarbone area. And so you can formulate a particular phrase that is meaningful to you, but you start them all with, even though I thought. And then whatever it is that's causing stress, even though I thought I couldn't get well, even though I thought I could never lose weight, even though I thought, I wouldn't find the kind of relationship that I'm looking for. I now know that. And so I help them formulate whatever it is that they are trying to reach, and then have them do tapping. And sometimes it's anxiety driven. Because there is, these huge fears that we have. So if you identify the fear, then you can put that into your message. Even though I thought I was a total slob and always spilling my milk or coffee or whatever, I now realize that that was a belief that I had, and that isn't true. So you kind of keep it short and simple and do your tapping that way. But it disrupts the meridians when they're tapped. They don't have the same ability to send the negative message anymore because you're replacing it with something that's positive.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that's a powerful method. We had a gentleman, we've had a few people talk about that, but a gentleman in particular, Eric, spoke about that. And, EFT was something that really helped him because he started to have panic attacks at work for whatever reason, and like debilitating, and he couldn't go into work, and happened to find somebody who was able to help him through with that, and really changed his life, and to the point that now he's building his practice of EFT to help people as well. Again, that's what's so, I think, exciting about, people may not find it exciting, but exciting when you think about, like, we have these stuck beliefs, but there are ways to change it. And sometimes it's in the things that we're saying, right? You can meet with a counselor, we can say it, or we can meditate, or we can write. But there's these really cool scientific things like EFT. We mentioned before we recorded, EMDR, which this therapist that our daughter's getting to know does EMDR. And I've heard about that. And it's, again, I'm not the trained specialist. I think you explained it better than I did. But again, it's bringing up those beliefs, and then with the rapid eye movement type of behaviors, trying to change those patterns in the brain.
Making new ones.
Yeah, new pathways.
Right. So the old ones are going to be less functional, and the new ones, as you do it over and over again, will become the avenues of choice that your brain will go down. So instead of thinking the old way, which was maybe debilitating, you will now be able to move it into a healthier pattern. And then that works. So I know the book that I wrote, in fact, I didn't tell you this, but last Saturday, just a couple of days ago, I was up at Marjorie Rawlings State Park, which Marjorie Rawlings wrote the Pulitzer Prize, The Yearling.
Oh, yeah.
And The Yearling was made into a movie, and she wrote a book called Cross Creek, and that was made into a movie. But back in the 20s, late 20s, early 30s, she found this property up near Gainesville, Florida. And it was it still is, an Orange Grove homestead, if you will. But when she found it, it was in deplorable condition. And so she was a socialite and had gone from New York, into the boonies in Florida. And it's her life there. So anyway, it's a state park. And 2 years ago, when COVID hit everybody, they closed everything down. And I was supposed to be there 2 years ago signing my book. So I got to go this past Saturday. And the book is about 3 mice that represent love, truth, and wisdom. And so they speak, they can talk to humans and communicate. And what they're teaching is our thoughts create our reality. So everything I've done my entire career has been about change your thoughts, change your life, but you have to change your thoughts.
Right.
So the fact that these are speaking mice, I am sitting on this porch in a rocker, and the chairs have all been, put outside. And so all the people that are listening are in the chairs, and I'm not paying any attention. And evidently to my right, in come about 20 chickens, because the chickens they're free range, so they can go wherever they want to go. But they all came in like on cue as I got ready to tell the story from the mice's point of view. And so these little mice that are talking, now these chickens are coming in, and it was the funniest thing in the world. Everybody was just laughing, because how do you do that? I mean, it was like on cue, in come the chickens.
Yeah. So funny. Yeah. Well, we'll make sure we put a link to that book too. I think that's awesome that you took, again, part of your life's work and put it into a children's book, and helps the kids understand it. And I'm sure helps the adults understand, leading with love. And, like you said, if you can change the truth, or there's some book that calls, when do the lies become the law? right? We have these lies that we've heard for so long, but we made it the law. Like,
right.
One last thing that I wanted to mention too, that I believe I've had the experience with our daughter in her treatment, which has been helping, and I've helping with changing beliefs, is using ketamine. I don't know if you've heard of that with certain treatment. I mean, it's a hallucinogen. It can be used as a recreational drug, if you will, but in controlled environments and in controlled amounts and through, with therapists, ketamine can be used to really change rigid thinking. And the way that the therapist really explained it to me when she was starting to, do this type of therapy is like, and I know people can't see us but we can see each other, so you put these two hands up next to each other and they're kind of rigid like this, but then you get some ketamine, infused, or however they take it. I think they do a nose spray or something, but then all of a sudden you're kind of like, oh, like, look at my hand, and oh, I'm looking here, and you're kind of looking at things differently. Right. And during that session, if you will, there's a lot of like motivational interviewing, and saying, talking about those beliefs or those thoughts, like, okay, well, I couldn't go out to dinner, for instance, if we're talking about eating disorders, or I can't go out to dinner with my girlfriends because I'm so afraid. And but then they start to, well, what would it look like if you were able to go there? What would it look like? What type of restaurant would you go to? What would you order? Why don't we look at a menu? And so it's like you start to have these thoughts about, and because of ketamine and the way that it works, it's just kind of opening up those thoughts. And as my daughter and the therapist would say, it kind of opens the floodgates, and there's lots of emotions and lots of thoughts. But during that time, again, you start to imagine what that future would look like, right. Or something different than that belief. And so then again, you come down from the high of ketamine, but your brain still remembers that somehow.
There is a wonderful documentary. I think National Geographic might have done it, but the name of it is Fantastic Fungi. And it's all about mushrooms, and not just the hallucinogenic ones, but identifying mushrooms that are edible and understanding, that we are in some ways very similar to mushrooms with our root system that we have. I'm not going to give it away because it is totally the most amazing little documentary. It's an hour and a half long, but they do talk about microdosing.
Right.
And the microdosing of hallucinogenic kinds of, whether it's a mushroom or whether it's marijuana or something else, you don't have to get high to the degree that it becomes a recreational drug. Right. It is simply done in a microdose to help you manage anxiety or help you change that belief system. So a lot of therapies now, which I'm very thankful for, because I never wanted to put people on medication unless I absolutely had to say this is your only choice. We do everything else first. Now you can kind of look and say, hey, how about microdosing, this particular drug? And it's more of a natural product. CBD and CBDA, even as tinctures with very little THC in them, do amazing things for people. And taken subliminally, under the tongue, or sublingually under the tongue. Yeah. It actually is a fast delivery system for sleep, for anxiety. I mean, there's so much that's now out there that wasn't out there even 10 years ago. It's more and more and more available.
Yeah, it is. And it's fascinating. I'm always one of those that's kind of against some of that, again, the big drugs and stuff like that. But I've opened myself up to it, and I've learned about it. And again, it can be so helpful.
So many pharmaceuticals, for every drug that they prescribe, it may have 5 to 10 side effects that you don't want.
Right.
And with these, there just isn't.
There isn't. And again, should be administered and, with a health, somebody that's trained and all of that. But, as we wrap up this time, I hope that people can see that, we develop these belief systems, these patterns and things like that. But there's all kinds of things that we can pick and choose from that can help us change those beliefs so that we can really go on and live meaningful lives.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Instead of the quiet desperation that many people live.
Right. And some people, I think, choose to, stay there in that.
They do because they get their needs met and they've learned to do that over a long period of time. So
somehow they found a way that it serves them. But I always love to have conversations with you, and I really appreciate you sharing today and your expertise and your stories and things like that. Of course, let us know where people can find you. I always put that in the show notes if people wanted to connect with you.
Well, I think that they would find, because you're on my shows a couple of times, so I think they would find the podcast interesting. So maybe make sure it's Synergy Connection. And it is on Apple, it's on Google, it's on Spotify, and what's the other one? iHeartRadio. So there's links to the major platforms that you would be able to go and listen to. There's 250 shows, I think, at this point. So they can go and listen to different people. There's a synopsis of each show. So it will tell them a little bit about what the show is about. And then they can decide if they want to, listen to it. They can find me easily enough just by using my name. I'm amazed that when I type my name in, everything that comes up, it's scary.
Yeah, I'm with you on that too. Right.
Yeah, it's just scary. But the book, you can go there to www.misstwigs.com, and it'll take you right into the website, and you can click there and go to Amazon and order it. I made it super easy for people to find. You can read parts of it. You can do a Kindle version, or you can order a copy of it. But it's all there. And if people want to seek me out to do, personal therapy, just use my email address, probably lucy.forsting@gmail.com. And I would be more than happy to, work with people, because I do it through Zoom anymore. It's very easy. People don't have to leave their homes, which, I think a lot of cancellations of appointments in years gone by was just because you would get home and you would go, oh, I just don't want to get back in the car again, or a headache or whatever. So now we can do it by Zoom or by phone. If people want to go for a walk while we're talking, they just put their AirPods in and off they go.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, again, I think this pandemic has taught us a lot of good ways to do things a little bit differently. And I think some of those things are definitely sticking. I mean, I've done some cool interviews with people that are now digital nomads, if you will. And one gal in particular who now she lives in a van, and it's not like living in a van. I mean, she has quite a fun life. I mean, she's an interior designer. She buys up properties and rehabs them. She does quite a bit of cool stuff on Instagram about living the van life. I mean, but she was an attorney. She was a lawyer, and it just wasn't serving her.
Yeah.
She's like, I just can't do this anymore. And she found this, and she's happy. And you can travel all around and live your best life there. So thanks for joining me today, Lucy. It's always a pleasure. Always great to talk about different things. And I love this topic, just of, again, how did you say that? Change your beliefs and you can change your life, or change your thoughts and you change your life. So I encourage people to try some of these things that we shared today, share the podcast with others, come back and listen, and make it a great life. Take care. Thanks for listening. If you like this podcast, head over to iTunes and leave me a 5-star review. Share it with others, and make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. I've got a tribe over on Facebook, so head over there and search for Juggling the Chaos of Recovery Podcast Tribe. And do you know somebody who has a story to share, a story of recovery and hope? Please let me know, as I'd love to feature them as a guest on one of these next upcoming podcasts. And perhaps you're looking for a community of like-minded, collaborative, and supportive people who cheer each other on as we strive to improve our lives. If that sounds like something you've been looking for, schedule some time with me. You'll find the links in the show notes. Let's talk, and let me help you find your way. And I'm here to tell you that you're worth it.